tight election in key battleground states as the race for the White House heats up. Plus, what to expect as the first trial of a former U.S. president goes to the jury next week. Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Calebs, and sitting in for Anna Naidu, and you're watching The Heat. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. With fewer than 6 months to go, several key issues still hanging over the November presidential election: abortion, immigration, the economy, plus what impact will Donald Trump's hush money trial have on the outcome? The former president is facing 34 counts of falsifying business records to cover up a payment that bought the silence of an adult film actress before the 2016 election. Okay, there's a lot to talk about in the next half hour. Let's get straight to our panel. Douglas Sloan, a Democratic strategist and principal with the National Capital Strategy Group. Shawn Parry-Giles is a political communication professor and director of the University of Maryland Center for Political Communication and Civic Development. Also with us here in our set, Adolfo Franco, an attorney and Republican strategist, and John Fishwick, Jr. He is a former U.S. attorney for the Western District of Virginia. Again, thanks to all of you. Firstly, John, I want to bounce out to you first, if I can. So the trial goes everything goes to the jury next week. They're going to go in. They've had time to sit around for this long holiday weekend. How do you believe that could impact this jury over such an issue that really everybody's watching?
Well, Sean, closing arguments in most criminal cases, at this point, a jury's already made up their mind. But I think in the hush money case, they have not made up their minds at all. They're wide open as to what they're going to do. And if you recall, a lot of folks said, well, these jurors are going to drop out. It's going to be too much pressure. All 12 folks who are on that jury are locked in on this case. And so I think the closing arguments will be critical in the case. I think each side will have to lay out why they think they should win. I think the jury will be very attentive. I think the delay, it's kind of been a reset for everyone. But I think the closing argument, Sean, will be critical in the case, unlike most criminal cases.
Yeah, John, going to quickly kind of walk us through that. What is the jury going to be looking for in these closing arguments? How critical will they be? Kind of go into detail what you expect to hear from both the prosecution and Trump's defense team.
Well, Sean, it's really been a tale of two cases. The prosecution will say, look, we've proved what we set out to prove, that Mr. Pecker, Mr. Cohen, and Mr. Trump got together. They had a conspiracy to kind of keep bad news away from the public, to buy it off, the hush money payment, and specifically to Stormy Daniels, and that the former president covered it up. He wrote checks to Michael Cohen for a retainer when really it was reimbursing him for the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. The defense had a very effective cross-examination of Michael Cohen. And I think they will say to the jury, look, you can't believe anything he said. He stole from the Trump organization. He lied to you about one of the critical conversations with the former president. You can't convict anybody on Michael Cohen's testimony. And the only way the prosecutors win is if you believe him, because ultimately the critical conversations were one-on-one with Cohen and Trump, either by phone or in person. So the defense is going to hammer that no one should be convicted by Michael Cohen, much less a former president.
Okay, Adolfo, I saw you nodding in agreement to a lot of what he said. I'm going to let you talk about Cohen in just a second, but first I want to get to a couple of issues. One, a guilty verdict against Trump. If you look at all the polls, it could have a devastating effect on him. Independents would certainly look the other way. A number of Republicans who have been in his corner. This is coming from recent polls from Reuters and Ipsos as well. 60% of the independents, as a matter of fact, would say they wouldn't vote for. Now, on the flip side, an acquittal is really a get-out-of-jail-free card for him. It's going to allow him to hit the campaign trail rejuvenated and really step up his attacks.
Well, yes, obviously an acquittal or more likely a hung jury would absolutely be something to boost the Trump campaign. There's no question about it. I think, frankly, this election would probably be over for all practical purposes, considering where President Trump is in the polls right now. However, if there is a conviction on this, we have written the Trump obituary, Shawn, so many times, or people have, I haven't. On this set, they have, and outside of this studio, they've written the obituary over and over again, and the president always seems to bounce back from the worst of news, including, by the way, the Stormy Daniels revelations that came out in 2016. People thought that was the end, or the famous Hollywood tape, if you'll recall, things of that kind. Obviously, this is, before Douglas and my friends chime in, this is now a court of, supposedly a court of law, but the so-called court of law, the prosecutor, the judge, from the perspective of conservatives is he's not gotten a fair shake, and this has not been, in my opinion as well, it's been a kangaroo court. It's charges in search of a crime. There is no crime here. So this will be the narrative as well. So it won't be one of these open and shut cases that that you see that will have an effect. There'll be a complete narrative, if there is a conviction, that will contradict that result.
Okay, Douglas, I want to jump to you. I want you first to respond to what Adolfo said about the court, the fact that it's a kangaroo court, that basically this has been orchestrated by Democrats. It's something we've read a lot from the right. But people who follow the court say that just doesn't hold water.
And it really doesn't. We're looking at not just this court in Manhattan in a case brought on by the Manhattan District Attorney, but 3 other courts, 4 different criminal indictments and 91 criminal charges. It's hard to excuse all of that and to say that, oh, well, you know, you don't expect that this will have much of an effect on Trump in the election when he is running in the party of law and order. There are die-in-the-wool Republicans that absolutely will not vote for a convicted felon no matter what. Now, maybe they won't come out. They're obviously not likely going to come out and vote for Joe Biden, but they won't vote for Donald Trump. And that can make all the difference and will make all the difference in this race. So it's really just hard to excuse that many criminal charges across that many different courtrooms and that many indictments.
Okay, and Douglas, I want to talk to you about Biden also stepping up his attacks on former President Trump recently when Biden was in Detroit. This is what he had to say.
The threat that Trump poses is greater in his second term than the first. It's clear that when he lost in 2020, and I mean this sincerely, something snapped in Trump. Every legal avenue Trump tried to challenge the election failed, so it unleashed an insurrection. And now he's running again. He's not only obsessed about losing 2020, he's clearly unhinged. Just listen to him. He calls the insurrectionists who stormed Capitol Hill patriots. He says if reelected, he wants, quote, every one of them pardoned. Let me ask you, what do you think he would have done on January the 6th if black Americans had stormed the Capitol?
Okay, Douglas, clearly that plays well to an audience, but I want you to think about this. I spoke with the head of the NAACP in Georgia recently, and he said that Biden made a lot of promises to blacks in 2020 and hasn't held up his end of the deal. Talked about civil rights, talked about police reform, talking about tuition forgiveness, that it simply hasn't come. And he said the challenge is going to be to get disenfranchised black voters off the couch. Has Biden done enough to win their support?
Well, I'd like to go back and cite a poll done by Cornell Belcher and Brilliant Corners that went from, I believe, February 15th to February 20th this year that was done specifically on black likely voters for the 2024 election that found that 84% of black voters are motivated to get out and vote in this election, that Trump's support has slipped since.
Okay, I think we've kind of lost Douglas for just a second. Adolfo, I want to give you a chance to jump in there real quickly before we move on to Shawn Parry-Giles.
Well, a couple of things. On African-American vote, President Trump is at 23% approval among black males. And even among females, he's doing much better than he did in 2020. There's no question. I mean, I like my friend Douglas. There's no question he's lost support, significant support among Hispanics and among blacks and the young people. His coalition is falling apart. Douglas knows it, and it's because of the failure of this administration. Going back quickly to the trial, it's not about the court system. It's about political prosecutors, including this hack, Mr. Bragg, and the others. These are all what's leading these charges. It's not the court system, it's the politicization of the system by prosecutors who have a political and partisan agenda. And that's what the American people are upset about, not just Republicans.
Okay, but let's remember, these are officers of the court as well. Okay, Shawn Parry-Giles, I want to thank you for waiting and apologize for taking 10 minutes to get to you. The Biden camp, to pick up on what Adolfo was just talking about, is prepared to really go on the attack about Trump if, and it's a big if, he is convicted. Now, if he's acquitted or if there's a hung jury, it's going to be very difficult for the Biden camp to find some kind of avenue to go down and say, this is a felon. And secondly, picking up on what Adolfo said, there is this huge population out there that thinks this is a political witch hunt, using Trump's term.
Certainly. I think one of the things we haven't talked about, though, is the impact of the trial on women voters because of the sense that, that he was allegedly having this affair with Stormy Daniels while his wife, was pregnant. And so I think, this narrative about Trump and his treatment of women is one that's pretty circulated a lot. And whether or not that combined with issues like abortion politics, reproductive rights, may swing some independent voters, may make a deciding factor for some women voters.
Yeah, and Shawn, also, you make a good point that we haven't really talked about women voters, but there's really so much at stake in this. We're making this out to be just Biden and Trump, but we're talking about the Congress here. We're talking about possibly appointing new justices to the highest court in the land. Really kind of set the table for us. What's at stake from 2024 to 2028?
Yeah, I think most recently added to the issue in the post-Dobbs and the erosion of reproductive rights is this question about contraception. And Trump made, it was indirect reference that there's a plan coming on contraception. But I think the context of that is that some state governments are not supporting the right to contraception. And we see that in Virginia, and it's also in Arizona. So I think that coupled with Trump saying there's a plan coming and referencing that it could be another state-based issue may get a lot of attention. And I think the Democrats are digging, further into this and playing up the coupling the reproductive rights to include are there threats to contraception for women, which I think will get a lot of attention.
And Douglas, I understand you're back now. I want you really to pick up on the point that I did ask you. Has Biden done enough to win support of the black vote?
I think that Biden has done enough to win the support of the black vote because right now black unemployment is at its lowest rate since the end of the Obama era. And quite frankly, as I had mentioned, I'll just go over it very quickly, black polling firms like Brilliant Corners have polled specifically black likely voters for the 2024 election, and it's completely different than what we're hearing from Marist and Gallup and these other places. And we're kind of seeing a replay of what happened with Romney versus Obama back in 2012. I went back and looked, Adolfo, at some of the polling back then, and even the firms like Gallup and Rasmussen had Romney ahead at this point. So in terms of has he done enough to do the black vote, well, that's kind of the interesting paradox of the Democratic Party. It is incumbent upon the black electorate to hold elected Democratic officials' feet to the fire regarding delivering issues that specifically address problems within the black community. So I think the black electorate, as in the past, as will be in the future, will support Democratic candidates because we know that we're not going to be able to get anywhere addressing issues with the Republican Party.
Adolfo's ready to spring out of the saddle here, so let me get in a couple of seconds.
Just quickly, that's a nice spin. Douglas is my friend. I was on the Romney campaign. We never polled 23% among black males, ever, anywhere near that. And Douglas knows it. They're in trouble with that constituency. They're in trouble with all the other minorities as well, and they're in trouble for the reasons you asked the question, Shawn. He has not delivered for that community, and they feel taken for granted and taken advantage of. The polling is the polling, and it's just across the board a 5-alarm fire for the Democratic Party. Lastly, on the Stormy Daniels comment that was made earlier, Wasn't this known in 2016, this affair? Wasn't this litigated by the American people? And now, again, this was supposed to be a bookkeeping trial, and we're talking about Stormy Daniels. This is why President Trump will survive all of this. Nothing here is new.
Or you could make the argument he survives it because nothing sticks to him. He's kind of this Teflon individual.
It's the same story you had in 2016. This is not a revelation, and this was never about the affair. It was about bookkeeping, and he said he was keeping it from embarrassment for his wife.
Okay, John, I want to kind of switch gears and move on to you. I want to talk about going back to January 6th and the ties to the U.S. Supreme Court. A second flag carried by rioters, attack on January 6th, was displayed outside the home of Justice Samuel Alito, upside down, which everybody knows shows that it is a nation that is under duress. An appeal to heaven flag also flown outside Alito's beach vacation home. And just recently, 2 weeks after the attack on the Capitol, Alito now taking part in some very key cases that are directly tied to that. What kind of message does this send? Because he's made it clear he is not going to recuse himself.
Well, I think, the public is concerned about the politicization of our judges. I think people don't have the confidence that they should have in our court system. The Trump cases are incredible stress tests on our legal system. To your question about the Supreme Court, I mean, it goes both ways. Justice Alito, I think now is not inspiring confidence when he does this. Has these flags up. The answers aren't very convincing. My wife put it up. I didn't really know much about it. Yeah. Folks on the other side said Ruth Bader Ginsburg did similar sorts of things, said similar sorts of things. I don't think folks are going to ultimately recuse judges. There's 9 justices. They're the highest judges in the land. I think it's hard to get them off a case. It's not good conduct. It's improper. He shouldn't do it. But I don't think he's going to be removed from a case, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg wasn't removed from a case.
Totally right.
But it's not good for the country's confidence in our court system, and I think he's got to own that problem, but I think he'll stay on all the cases.
Adolfo, I mean, it seems to me,
100%
growing up, the justices in this nation were always held to a higher standard. Justice is blind. Justice is supposed to just weigh the evidence. And then you have what Alito did, and Ginsburg, but also we have Clarence Thomas taking how many gifts and how many freebies from his friends, and also the issues with his wife and her actions and trying to say that the 2020 election was stolen. What does this do to confidence? You're an attorney.
Well, first of all, his wife is a law school classmate of mine and has been an activist and has her own right and her own points of view, just as Judge Merchan's daughter and wife are Democrat activists. I don't see the entire panel up in arms about that. So, and John Merchant gave money to the Democratic Party. But going back to the questions about the Supreme Court, I completely agree with the analysis that was given. Justice Ginsburg, in terms of gifts and so forth, she was involved in the same things regarding an Israeli trip and had to amend her ethics form. I never saw the outrage on this program or on the left and the rest of it. There's a double standard. And this is what is happening outside the Washington bubble. Whether it's Donald Trump or the Supreme Court, people are seeing very clearly there's a set of rules and application of scrutiny to conservatives, and there's one that's just a pass for Democrats, whether it's a case of Ginsburg and Alito, or the case of these other matters regarding the New York case. The bottom line is absolutely correct. Justice Alito is not recusing himself. This is a political maneuvering. The attack on this court is by the Democrats who are trying to pack the court and politicize the court because they don't have the majority. In the 1960s and 70s, we had an activist court that changed radically the interpretation of the Constitution. There was an effort to impeach Justice Douglas at the time that failed for the same reasons.
Yeah. Douglas Sloan, I want to bring you back in and kind of switching gears again, talking about the, if you want to call it, the primary race between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump this year. That got pretty bitter pretty quickly because Haley was the one candidate who continued to stick it out despite pleas from many Republicans for her to just drop out, that it appeared that Trump had all the support in the world. And at one point, she questioned Donald Trump's mental fitness and said that to CNN that both Trump and Biden were equally bad. Now, recently, she has come out and said that she's going to support Trump, something that really caught a lot of her supporters off guard. I want you to hear what she had to say.
As a voter, I put my priorities on a president who's going to have the backs of our allies and hold our enemies to account, who would secure the border, no more excuses, a president who would support capitalism and freedom, a president who understands we need less debt, not more debt. Trump has not been perfect on these policies. I've made that clear many, many times. But Biden has been a catastrophe. So I will be voting for Trump.
And she went on to encourage Trump to reach out to her supporters. And Biden apparently already has plans to try to meet with some of the leaders, some of the donors. Douglas, what do you think of that? How do you think it's going to go? I mean, at the end of the day, don't Republicans have a lot more in common than any kind of liberal Democrat would, no matter how much these Republicans don't want Trump back in the White House?
Well, I would think so. However, Trump isn't your normal, everyday, dyed-in-the-wool conservative Republican. He has deviated from the Republican doctrine ever since he came into office. And many hardcore dyed-in-the-wool Republicans are very aware of that. And for someone to talk about strict adherence to the Constitution, to the law, and to focus on so many issues that many Republicans hold near and dear, Trump just hasn't stood up to many of those values. And right now, since he lost the election, which he still has not admitted, he says the election was stolen, which is bananas for a presidential candidate. He says his rhetoric has become even more inflammatory. He says he's going to be a dictator on day one. He's talking about the unified Reich. He appointed Supreme Court justices that gutted a woman's right to choose. So he's gone even more off the Republican reservation. So yes, Joe Biden should be courting those Republicans, moderate Republicans, because he is presenting himself as the sane alternative to a Trump presidency, which he admits he's going to be a dictator on day one.
Okay, Shawn, I want to get back to some of the issues. And we did talk about contraception, a woman's right to choose, and a Pittsburgh station, a local reporter there, seemed to press Trump on the issue. And at the time, President Trump said that he seemed open to supporting regulations on contraception and that his campaign would release a policy on the issue, quote, very shortly. He later said that statement was misinterpreted and backed away from it. But still, there's a lot of concern. If you listen to what the justices had to say, that they would keep an open mind and then very quickly voted to restrict a woman's rights. How is this going to play?
Yeah, I think it's becoming a bigger issue just in the last few days when the interview took place in Pittsburgh. And of course, the Democrats are going to pounce on that because they see this as a winning issue. And states, as I mentioned earlier, are, Schumer wants to pass, a right to contraception act in the Senate, but some of the states are not passing similar measures at home. So I think that's going to get more attention. But I think for a lot of women, it's not on a concern right now because they couldn't even imagine a world where contraception would be restricted. So it's going to take some time for the Democrats to play up this issue and to get people's attention. But I think if they do, it just reinforces some of the negativity about Trump and reproductive rights.
And let's take a look at how voters are considering these major issues. Adolfo, if we look at the swing states right now, Trump has a lead in virtually all the swing states. This coming from Bloomberg News and a Morning Consult survey: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, 48 to 44%. Now, there's also this side that perhaps 1 in 5 could change their minds before the election. But what does this tell you, that where Trump stands on these swing states right now? Do you buy polling, firstly?
Well, yes, I buy polling. Polling subject to change. But there are two things to keep in mind on polling. First of all, the persistent negative approval ratings that this president has and has had now for 3 years. He's now, the latest last week, he's dipped in some polls to 36% approvals. That's gel. This is Jimmy Carter territory. Worse. It's the worst polling ever. So it's impossible for an incumbent president to really overcome this. This election is going to be decided probably in 7 states that you just named with 93 electoral votes, okay? President Trump lost the vast majority of those states. He won North Carolina. Now it's the complete opposite. New York Times, since this program loves to quote the New York Times, has...
we quote everybody.
Yeah, no, you don't call the Wall Street Journal enough. But the New York Times has President Trump ahead by 11 points in Nevada. That's that's just a landslide situation that we're talking about. This election has the potential to be something like 1980 in terms of potentially an electoral landslide for Donald Trump. But I will say this about the abortion issue quickly. Problem is, this is a nice conversation here. The American people and all the polling demonstrate the economy, immigration, and crime are the #1 issues.
Okay.
Not abortion.
Douglas, not a lot of time left. We know that Donald Trump showed up in the Bronx. Very blue area. Got a pretty big crowd out. In reaction to that, Biden issued an ad. Take a look at this ad quickly.
Donald Trump disrespecting black folk is nothing new. He was sued for refusing to rent his apartments to black families and called for the execution of 5 innocent black and brown teenagers.
And it's more than anger, it's hatred.
It's why Trump stood with violent white supremacists, warned of a bloodbath if he loses the next election, and if he's president again, vowed to be a dictator who wants revenge on his enemies.
You know, Douglas, there's no way to sugarcoat this. If Biden really has to go to this length in a traditionally blue state, what does it say about it?
I don't think it says much of anything. They're just erring on the side of caution here. Again, I don't believe any of those polls that are saying that Trump is making this huge dent within the black community. If Trump was really had black and brown votes and support like those polls say, he would be running away on the national scene in terms of polling, but he's not. The numbers simply don't add up. He's not going to be able to bring in all of these moderate Democrats and independent voters after January 6th, after 91 charges, and after all of this inflammatory rhetoric. The math is simply not there.
Okay, guys, we have less than a minute. Really quick, I need just like a 1 or 2 word answers from you. Shawn, I'll start with you. Quick answer. What is the outcome of the hush money trial?
I think he's not convicted.
Okay. Moving on, Douglas.
Oh, I think he will be convicted at the hush money trial.
Interesting. John?
It's just a matter of what the,
Guilty.
Guilty. Okay. Adolfo, I'm going to give you the last word. You have about 15 seconds.
Hung jury.
Hung jury.
That's what's going to come out of that.
So our group has 2 and 2. That'd be a hung jury in many cases. We'll see. This is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting the way they move on from all this and to what degree it remains a big part of this campaign. But I want to thank all of the members of our panel for your insight and comments. We appreciate it. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Sean Calebs in Washington, D.C. As always, thanks for watching, everyone.